He's a nickel market expert and currently CEO of a development company focused on an Ontario project in Timmins. It's Mark Selby, CEO of Canada Nickel. Mark, welcome to Kitco.
Thanks, Michael. Very glad to be here.
Mark, you know the nickel market. Can you thumbnail demand and who are the major suppliers?
Sure. So nickel demand right now has historically been driven primarily by stainless steel, alloy steel, and high nickel alloys, like you see in jet engines. And it's always been a very high growth metal, growing at 4 or 5% a year because of those the inherent properties and attractiveness of those specific material uses. What's gotten very exciting over the last few years is nickel is now the most energy dense metal, and as such you're seeing more high nickel batteries being made going forward, and so the nickel demand in the past year grew by about 15%. That was double-digit growth in the stainless steel sector, and more than 100% growth year over year in the battery sector, which now makes up just over 10% of the overall market.
And the big names in the space being like Sherritt and Vale and Norilsk Nickel, but because we're seeing this anticipated demand, there could be new entrants into the sector.
Oh, for sure. So the key part is a huge amount of nickel over the last 15 years has come from China and Indonesia making this nickel pig iron, and now converting this nickel pig iron into matte so that it can be used to make battery grade type products. And there you've got companies like Tsingshan, who's now the world's largest nickel producer by a factor of 2x. Other companies, DeLong, Jinchuan, and then some of the other major Chinese companies. With Indonesia today, producing almost half the world's nickel. I know a lot of people still think about Sudbury being as the nickel capital, but unfortunately, the companies that own it now haven't reinvested in it as much as it has been. So, Canada as a whole is now down to about just over 5% of the overall market.
We hear a lot about energy transition and battery metals. I read your investor report as well too, and you certainly touch on it like everybody that's pushing through what's happening with nickel. What's the smartest take? What's the smartest analysis you've heard about growing demand for nickel, Mark?
Yeah, so there's a report called Battery Metals Report or Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. Both do, pretty good in-depth, views in terms of, really breaking down what's happening in the battery sector, and then in terms of how the EV market is evolving. Again, anything that's a new technology and a new market entrant, there's a lot of moving pieces, and again, for sure here, you hear lots of talk about new battery technologies. New EV platforms, is lithium iron phosphate, which is no nickel, going to dominate? Is it the high nickel batteries that are going to dominate? And so some of those publications do a pretty good job of just helping people, understand some of the fundamental trends. I think, a couple key takeaways. One, just remember that, batteries, billions of people hold them in their hands and next to their head. So safety is always a concern with that. And again, putting your family in a car on top of, and the battery sitting right underneath the family. Any new technology, if it works in the lab, is going to go through some pretty extensive, testing, to be able to be used on a widespread basis on such a broad base of consumer, and vehicle platforms. So, the leading technologies today will be the leading technologies for the next decade. Beyond that, you will see some stuff that comes through there. But the thing I would, say to people about nickel is that, nickel, the thing that it has going for it is this fundamental property of, of the various metals that can be used in a cathode. It has the highest energy density. So it's, it gives cars the most range. It gives cars the most energy possible. The problem is nickel is the thing that used to make batteries explode back 15 years ago when the first electric vehicles came out. But the battery companies and the car companies have got, much better at maximizing the amount of nickel and still being able to operate it safely. And so, what you'll see is high nickel batteries dominate for the big trucks, Ford F-150 pickup trucks, and GMC is actually making an electric vehicle Hummer. So those will all be nickel batteries. And then in Europe and China, where people drive very short distances, lithium iron phosphate is exactly the right technology. And then in the middle, I think you'll see a lot of car companies like Tesla today giving people, if they want to pay more, they can have the longer range battery. Otherwise, they'll get a lithium iron phosphate battery.
You're CEO of Canada Nickel. Can you thumbnail the company and what you're focused on, Mark?
Sure. We're a brand new company. We've only been around really for 2.5 years. We made a new nickel discovery, which is the largest nickel discovery since the early 1970s. We've put together just recently an entire district of properties around Timmins, and we think we may find another half dozen Crawfords around Timmins. And again, nickel, sometimes you find deposits in clusters. And these deposits, these types of minerals are an excellently positioned for demand coming down the pipe, because the rock that hosts the mineral, 80% of what we're mining are made up of minerals that, when exposed to air, spontaneously absorb CO2. So we believe we can not only be a low carbon producer, but a zero carbon producer with byproduct credits. And so, in a whole pile of US automakers, whole pile of European automakers, who are looking for clean, green sources of nickel, we think we're ideally located in Timmins, which is a great location to be able to actually build and permit a big mine like we're planning to do with Crawford.
You mentioned also that you're going to be a low cost producer.
Yes, yeah, no, we're right now, based on our PEA, we're in the first quartile of the cost curve. And so, and we'd be one of the 5 largest nickel sulfide operations once we're fully ramped up. So, again, it's great to have a new project, and great to be able to be in a place like Timmins with good First Nations and community support that, is allowing us to aggressively advance this project.
We're at around $11 a pound right now for nickel. Is this a price where it makes, getting new nickel mines built sustainable? And also, I guess, does the industry have, does the industry believe that these prices are going to be maintained?
Yeah, the one thing that's unique about nickel, every commodity is cyclical. That's the nature of commodity businesses. But nickel is somewhat unique that it goes through these super cycles every 15 to 20 years. We went through one in the late 60s, one in the late 80s, one in the mid 2000s. And it's because fundamentally nickel has always been the most expensive base metal. So people only use it when they need to. And so when you get a fundamental supply demand imbalance, it takes a much sharper rise in price to bring about that, getting the market back into balance. And so, in the early 2000s, we saw nickel prices go up 12x. I'm not sure they're going to go up this much, but again, with this really strong surging demand from the electric vehicle sector, we believe that we're going to see another one of these super cycles emerge in the 2023, 2025 time period, which is going to be, great for those companies that can get their projects in a position to be able to take advantage of it.
We have the price. Lyle Tritton, a nickel consultant, one of his concerns about seeing nickel projects through was a simple fact that there seemed to be a lack of a midstream. There seemed to be a lack of an ability to do the processing and things like that. What's your thoughts on, if we can carry these through from being able to mine them and eventually be able to get them into batteries in North America?
Sure. Yeah. So there's two key trends that I think are quite positive for nickel miners. So first off, nickel historically wasn't effectively an oligopoly. You had a handful of smelters, who effectively dictated terms to the mining companies and did a good job capturing a lot of value for themselves. One of the benefits of this huge boom in the EV sector is you're seeing a huge amount of processing capacity get built within China that can start to take a range of nickel intermediates. And again, as demand continues to go up, they'll find new ways to use nickel materials that are further and further up, closer to the mine. So, that is great news for the miners. That kind of this oligopoly that's existed for most of the time is gone. Now, the other part is, again, US automakers and European automakers, don't want, the nickel to start in North America, have to go to China and then come back again, given all the geopolitics we've seen in the last few years, that creates some supply chain risk for them. But, as an example, Umicore is a big supplier in this space. Their estimate of how much nickel is needed in North America is 300,000 tons per annum. In Canada today, we only produce just over 150,000 tons. And so, the GMs of the world, they'll find a way with their battery precursor partners, to build that midstream capacity in North America so that they can have a very short end-to-end supply chain within North America. So it's not quite there yet, but it's going to look very different in 5 years. And I think, again, it'll be great news for nickel miners everywhere.
Australia market seemed to be much more bullish on nickel and on the strategic metals battery metal space, if you prefer, compared to North America. I think of what the fight that you had, Wyloo and BHP over Noront Resources, and you just see the number of mergers and acquisitions that are occurring occurring over in that country.
Yeah, no, for sure. I wish that the opposite was true, but that is the reality as a TSX listed company. I think this unfortunately is one of the fallouts. Back in the mid 2000s, I was at Inco at the time, and we tried to merge with Falconbridge, and that didn't come through. And both of those companies disappeared off the exchange. Rio Algam disappeared, Alcan disappeared. And so, when you look at the mining exchange today, we're relatively dominated by gold stocks. And so, a lot of the mining resource funds that used to be in Toronto or still in Toronto have migrated to be much more gold focused over time. The other part too is there's a lot more money going into passive funds than actively managed funds. And so again, the sort of stock picking of picking different mining companies, is also shrunk in Toronto. Conversely, in Australia, you've got, again, specifically for nickel, you've got, pure nickel plays from exploration stage through development into production, into large production. So if you're a, mining investor or resource investor, you kind of have a whole, pipeline of nickel ways to play nickel that, really hasn't existed in Canada for quite a while.
Lastly, Mark, milestones out of Canada Nickel over the next 12 months.
Yeah. So again, we've done a lot in 2 years, and we expect to get a lot done this year as well. So by the end of this year, we'll have our full feasibility study done, just over 3 years from the 5th drill hole, which we're proud of our team being able to execute like that. We'll have a resource update in the second quarter. We're filing our formal permit applications to be able to get the project permitted in this quarter. We've got MOUs in place with the 3 local First Nations groups that we work with, and we expect to have definitive agreements in place with them by the end of the year. So again, 2020 and 2021 were quite exciting, and we think 2022 is going to be our best year yet.
Mark, thanks for making time for Kitco.
Always glad to. Thanks, Michael.
He's Mark Selby. He is CEO of Canada Nickel. My name is Michael McRae, and you're watching Kitco Mining.